Good evening and welcome everyone to the IMA Weekly Show. I am Dr. Ryan Cole, and tonight we're talking about something important, courage. And I love the derivation of the word cor, which goes to French or Latin meaning heart. It means spirit, temperament, valor. We're not talking about credentials. We're not talking about compliance. We're not talking about titles. Courage. And what does it take to lead with principle when your job's on the line, when your reputation's at risk, when your institutional pressure tells you to stay quiet? As we all know, healthcare is at a crossroads. And what we do in moments of pressure defines who we are. So tonight we're asking, what does it mean to dare to be a Daniel in modern healthcare? And I'm joined by two leaders who understand what it means to stand firm. Dr. Joseph Varon, Professor of Medicine and President and Chief Medical Officer of the Independent Medical Alliance, and Chris Ekrem, a former hospital CEO and executive leader with decades of experience in healthcare administration. Joe, welcome. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you. And before you start, I think we have something important to discuss, and that is to congratulate you, Ryan, on that expanded role that you are going to be having with us in leadership and the Independent Medical Alliance. I mean, you have been fundamental to many of the things that we have done. And just recently, as recent as today, thanks to you, changes are happening in the legislation. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Well, thank you. I'm honored to take on more roles here with the Independent Medical Alliance and continue the voice for medical freedom with this amazing team. Yeah, I want to share just a quick win we just had here in Idaho, and I think it should give courage to other states. I just came from a Senate committee hearing. We have a bill to have a moratorium on mRNA products for pregnant women and children under the age of 18. So it passed the healthcare committee and will be going to the floor. So one more step in the right direction. It's a moratorium. It's only for a couple of years, but hey, it's progress. And I hope other states continue to do so. So we'll see what happens, but just grateful to be part of the amazing team that helped put that legislation together. So, Chris, you say dare to be a Daniel. What does that mean in today's healthcare environment? I know you've prepared a presentation, and we would love to see it. But yeah, what does it mean? I love that phrase, dare to be a Daniel.
So you probably have heard that in churches over the years, dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone. And if you think about Daniel, for those of you that may not in the audience know much about the book of Daniel in the Bible, he was, out of everybody outside of Christ, today I would want to be a Daniel. I'd want to be just like Daniel. He'd be somebody that I would admire greatly. And so if you go back, I'll just real quick give you sort of a synopsis of this is Daniel chapter 6. So when Darius, the new king of Babylon, took over the royal throne, he appointed 120 governors to govern the empire. Daniel, who served the past Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, was chosen along with two other leaders to supervise the governors. The governors and two other supervisors got jealous of Daniel because he did better work than they did. They couldn't find any fault in Daniel. So because of their jealousy, they came up with a scheme to trick the king. And they came to Darius and said, look, come up with an order saying, anyone who requests anything from any god or from any human being for 30 days must only come from the king. Whoever violates this order will be thrown in the lion's den. Well, they already knew what Daniel would do. So when Daniel learned about the new order, though, this is key. When he learned about the new order, he went home as he always did and prayed facing Jerusalem 3 times a day. He already knew his goose was cooked, right? When Daniel's enemies observed him praying to God, all of them went together to Darius to accuse Daniel. Set the trap, right? King realized what happened, immediately tried to see if he could find a way to rescue Daniel. But the governors and supervisors reminded Darius that no order that the king issues can be changed. Laws of the Medes and the Persians, right? Daniel got thrown in the lion's den, wasn't harmed at all, and Darius was overjoyed that Daniel was saved. He was so impressed that he wrote to the people of his empire that everyone should fear and respect Daniel's God from then on. Daniel then prospered during the reign of Darius and Cyrus the Great. So what it means, dare to be a Daniel, is you stand up for what's right, knowing the consequences could be fatal, maim you, hurt you, financially ruin you, whatever it is, you're going to do the right thing no matter what.
Absolutely. And we've seen that with so many colleagues in this era in which we live. And you're a great example of leadership, Chris, and Joe is as well. I mean, Joe, you went through a lot of institutional pressures. So when you hear Chris describe what Daniel went through and standing firm, what moments went through your mind from your experience?
I mean, this is a deja vu, I mean, everything that we were doing, and we have all this uphill battle, and it's like, I feel like that little choo-choo train that we give our little kids. It's like, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. It is exactly how you feel, because you have all of these, even colleagues, hospitals, just going after you for doing the right thing. So you have to get very creative.
And what moment did you realize, Dr. Varon, that there would be a significant cost associated with what you were doing?
The moment I decided to do the right thing for people, when I realized, I'm going to talk specifically as it pertains to COVID. When I was told you need to use remdesivir, it's like, I had tried remdesivir, it didn't work. It was killing patients. I tried everything because I'm a fair person. But the moment I went against the narrative, the moment I went against doing what they wanted me to do, and I started doing what was right for the patient, then I knew that, it was going to be costly. I could lose my license. As you well know, I went in front of the Texas Medical Board a couple of times, and they asked me, why are you using ivermectin? I said, because it works. I mean, simple as that. And I showed them data, and everything was cool. But having said that, many of my colleagues didn't have the same luck that I have, that people would listen. So it's a sad story.
Yeah, they made friends with the king instead.
Instead.
And did you ever look back and say, was it worth it?
Oh, no question about it. Every life you save is a world that you have saved. I mean, there is no question about it. So for every person that I've saved in my life, for every person that I've saved during the difficult times of COVID, I think it was worth absolutely everything. The countless nights of being working, the losing friends, losing family, losing, people that did not want to talk to you anymore, just because you were thinking in a different way.
Well, and I love that, because I've reflected on this as well. Just the fact that we do it for not self, not recognition, but for others. And I love that you point out that it's generational. Each life that you helped, saved, improved, that goes on for generations. And I think that's beautiful. Chris, I want to ask you the same thing. Okay, as a hospital executive, where were you personally challenged?
Oh, I've seen lots of challenges over the years, and one of the biggest things is I had to make a tough call when a certain individual committed fraud, and I knew when I had to make the tough call that it would cost me significantly, cost my job. But at the end of the day, when this individual said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" From somebody much higher up than me, I said, "Absolutely. There is no choice other than do the right thing." Now, could I have just said, "Yeah, I could take the easy road"? Sure, I could have, but I can't sleep with myself at night. And at the end of the day, I'm not just responsible to God, but I need to be able to sleep well, knowing that I did the right thing. And so,
and did you feel alone in that? I mean, that's the struggle I think a lot of people feel, is when we're faced with these tough, ethical, courageous stands. And a lot of people say, "Oh, thanks for being so courageous." And in my heart, I just kind of say, "Well, I'm just doing what's right." But did you feel alone when you were navigating that, or what helped you navigate that?
I would say, first of all, it really goes back to using the principles that you were raised with, because ultimately you're going to go back to your basic training, right, in life. So you're going to go back to what are the principles that I truly believe in, and then you're going to take action on that, and you're going to live that out if you really believe it. And so for me, whether I was alone or not, I would still do it. But did I feel alone at the time? Yes and no. No, in the sense that I had my folks, I had my wife, I had my friends, I had all kinds of colleagues that I could talk to. So the key is to surround yourself with really good people, and by doing that, it allows you to go through the tough times.
And I think what many of us have learned from this process is you surround yourself with those good people. And sometimes we do stand alone, but at the same time, you find a whole new family of really good people that support you in what you're doing. And I think that's an amazing blessing, as it were, from taking a stand. And when you look back at standing up to the system and standing up to institutional pressures, would you do anything differently? Through the retrospectoscope of life, is there something that, lessons learned or how to approach things?
I would still make the decisions that I did, but if I had to do it over again, I would certainly spend more time building really close relationships with, for instance, my employees more than I probably did at the time. So if I had to look back on it, I'd say, yeah, I would probably do that in a way that would be different, it'd be better. So when you're a first time executive, when you're young and so forth, you get to make all kinds of mistakes, but good judgment comes from bad judgment.
I love
right?
that.
And so we use those experiences to get good judgment by failure, by trial and error, and doing things that maybe are not great. But at the end of the day, if you've learned, you've learned.
Yeah, experience is an amazing teacher. So, let's go through some ideas on principles in practice. So, living with courage every day. Where does courage get tested most often? We'll throw that out to both of you.
Dr. Varon, you want to go ahead?
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, I get courage gets tested on me every day, every day in clinic. Every time I'm doing something that the narrative says this is not the way to do it. Every time I try something new, or I'm working, thinking outside the famous box. I mean, I think that's where it goes, but it really starts getting hard, especially when you are working at big institutions and places where they basically tell you, this is the way you are doing things and take it or leave it. And we were actually, Chris and I, we were talking before we started, when I finished my medical training, my very first job in the US was to be the chief of intensive care at MD Anderson Cancer Center. For 3 years, I worked. I loved it. It was like a big ICU. I had what I call directoritis. I wanted to be the director of something. But I was belonging to a gigantic institution that would tell me what I needed to do. I lasted 3 years. And then at the end of 3 years, I said, this is not what I want. I want to be able to do things in a different way.
How about you, Chris?
I mean, really, courage in this book that I'll show everybody called Cowboy Ethics, What Wall Street Could Learn from the Code of the West. So I got to meet the author. He's an incredible guy, and met him twice. One at in Fredericksburg, Texas, at the Navajo Grill, and then I got to meet him at Possum Kingdom by the lake in Texas. And in this book, it talks about having courage. Basically means being scared, you might say, out of your wits, but settling up anyway, right? And so the courage that we have is we might be fearful, but saying, you know what, I don't really care. I'm just going to move forward, even though I don't know what's going to happen next. So it really goes back to trust, right? At the end of the day, having courage is trusting, but the trust should be based upon the evidence throughout your life, right? It's not a blind trust. There's evidence that I can trust something because I've seen what's gone all the way. And even when I don't know, I've seen enough evidence throughout my life to say, you know what, in the past I can remember this or that. So I'm going to trust based upon the fact I know I've always been led in this way, or whatever it is. And so I think that's really where it comes from. But we get to see what we're made of through difficult circumstances, not when everything's going great.
100%.
And Ryan, I know that Chris has some slides that he would love to show us that pertain to what he's just saying. So I would love to see his slides.
If you can pull those up.
All right. So we talked about Daniel and how he was a trustworthy man of integrity, did what's right regardless of the consequences. This ties in, though. These are, if you think about the principles that Daniel lived by, he actually lived by these principles right here that's outlined from Cowboy Ethics, what Wall Street could learn from the Code of the West. So the first one is live each day with courage. We talked about that. Take pride in your work. Always finish what you start. Do what has to be done. Be tough but fair. When you make a promise, keep it. Now, when we talk about when you make a promise, keep it, that's actually a really great word or great phrase to think of. When you see that, think accountability. That's all it means. Accountability is just when you make a promise, keep it. Ride for the brand, talk less and say more. Remember that some things aren't for sale, and know where to draw the line. If everybody in healthcare right now adhered to those 10 principles, can you imagine what life would be like for all of us in healthcare as a physician or CEO or a housekeeper? I mean, it would be wonderful. And so it all goes back to developing a firm foundation in what we're doing. So everything goes back to trust in organization. I can deal with people who aren't saints, but what I cannot deal with in life as a CEO or a leader, really, it doesn't matter who we are, I can't deal with untrustworthy people. They need to be out of the organization, period. And so leadership has got to be trustworthy. Otherwise, there's really no point in even being there. And then staff and the management need to know that they can shoot straight with the leadership team. That's critical. How many people have you met who they're like, no, I don't want to hear any bad news? If you've ever seen Robin Hood Men in Tights,
Yeah.
and he says, is it good news or bad news? Well, sir, it's bad news. What if you told me the bad news in a good way? And that's what a lot of leaders want. They want somebody to just, give them sunshine and rainbows, and it's not always that way. So when we talk about, remember that some things aren't for sale, we see healthcare journals, I can think of very many, academic institutions, medical associations, taking money in return for something, right? We can think of the American Academy of Pediatrics, right? We can think of all kinds of organizations out there that get money from different organizations. This is the exact opposite of what we want to do with Cowboy Ethics. Cowboy Ethics is saying absolutely not. And remember that no deal is better than a bad deal in life. Now, the concept of being tough but fair, making the tough call is all about having courage and being disciplined in that process, and really going back to, you can't worry about the consequences when you do the right thing. When you make a promise, keep it. This goes back to accountability. It's much better to not say anything than to promise something and never follow through in the first place. The follow through really is what I see as the typical missing link to success. Now, when we talk about ride for your brand, you see this all the time. People talking really poorly about their company or the brand, their boss or whatever it is. Now, what this also means is when we're riding for the brand, we also don't want to oversell what we can do. It's one thing to speak nicely about a brand, but it's another thing to say, hey, you know what? Let's not oversell this. And the first step in riding for the brand is to do an honest assessment of an organization. So this goes back to being able to look in the mirror and say, I need somebody to come in and say, I'm seeing some issues. Let's talk, right? I mean, that's pretty critical. Developing grit. This is something that people really struggle with today in leadership. If you think about the financial sustainability of businesses today, everything goes back to making tough calls that are related to strategy, service, finance, operation, you name it. It is all about doing the right thing at the right time and being consistent, and then living within your means. Do what has to be done. If you read the book Cowboy Ethics, imagine if you had a horse that was lame and you knew that the worst thing is to just let it, keep suffering. The last thing you want to do is keep that horse suffering. So they had to do some really tough things. They might have to shoot the horse or whatever it meant, right? And there are times where, in healthcare today, we're going to have to make some tough calls. We make those tough decisions. So one of the things a friend of mine said, she said, Chris, she said, sacred cows do make the best burgers. Now that, what, that needs to be a new book. And so, but when we do things, it's one thing to make a tough call, but it's another thing to also say, before I make this call, let's make sure that we're actually making decisions based upon the weighting of evidence, not anecdotal stories, not things that we don't have any evidence for, because that's another big piece. And know where to draw the line. So you need to know your deal breakers way in advance. And Daniel knew his deal breaker clearly, because when he was told, hey, you know what, this is the order that came, he went right back to his house, did what he did. He didn't say, well, let me kind of think about this. Maybe I can push it way, way off, and maybe we really don't have to deal with it today. So he clearly knew. And his friends did the same thing when they were thrown in the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so, if you think about, well, how do we apply this to work and home and so forth, weigh the evidence against any claims that people make to make that informed decision. It's critical. Think about if somebody says, well, what do you think we ought to do, Chris? Let's say they're working in a hospital. So, well, what would you do if it was your business and all your personal dollars were at stake? What would you do? Whatever that is probably the answer to the question, right? We all know what to do in life, right? It's very simple, but very difficult to do it. At the end of the day, you have to be okay with your own conscience. I think this is critical when you're negotiating. This is critical just day to day. Always be willing to walk away, even if, let's say your boss tells you to do something like, hey, I need you to lie about this in sales or, whatever. No, I'm not doing it. And if they're not okay with that, then it's time to seek out new employment. But also remember that courage, one of the silver linings in all this is courage is extremely contagious when people see this, much more than weakness. Courage is extremely contagious. Just you can see this in so many examples in life. And these 10 principles from Cowboy Ethics, I think, are the answer to today's biggest problems, especially as it relates to healthcare. So with that, I'll stop sharing here.
Well, that's fantastic. I love that idea of writing for the brand. And I think, especially in healthcare, we need to remember that the brand, I live out here in Idaho, and much of that Western ranch horse cattle culture still, and that brand of the ranch, you see them over the ranches, you see them on the entrances. And we need to remember the brand that we're truly writing for is the patient.
Right.
And sometimes we get stuck in these organizational structures and algorithms and challenges. So how do you find loyalty to an institution versus loyalty to that patient? How do you, especially when an institution loses its way? What are some words of advice in that area?
So I used to tell all my clients when I was an executive coach, I would always say, just remember in life, you're going to get a glass of Kool-Aid that the company's going to give you. I said, drink enough for them to think that you're part of them, but then put the rest away and put it in a case and look at that every day to remind yourself that you don't drink the Kool-Aid all the way, because we don't need to be like Jim Jones.
Oh, yeah. Great example.
We need to have clarity about what we're doing. So you need to be unbiased in your viewpoint and say, I'm really seeing this or that at my organization, or having an independent voice come in from outside the organization and say, could you help me find my blind spots? I really need to know what that is. So I think that's the critical first step is doing an honest assessment of who you are and your organization. But at the end of the day, if you're getting pressure from, let's say, a corporation to do something that is not right, you got to figure out first do I know for sure that I've verified that this is the directive? Did I verify that indeed this is coming down the pike? And if you've verified and they say, yeah, we need you to do something that you're not comfortable with, then you need to either make a tough call, exit the organization, or say, is there something I could do to influence and maybe push back and say, hey, I really appreciate where you're trying to go with this, but I'm not comfortable with this. Could we do X, Y, and Z?
And that's such a great point, is bringing an alternate point of view to bear on whatever the situation is. Because these institutions, yeah, they do have goals, and some are for profit and others are not for profit, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the patient at the end of what we're all doing in healthcare, and being able to say, okay, you have this point, I have this point, but what if there's another point of view? In your experience, Joe, do you think it's harder in healthcare or in medicine overall today than it used to be to be able to do what Chris is saying?
Oh, no question about it. It's 10,000% more difficult. I mean, I can still remember things that I used to do without having to get 20 different authorizations from hospital CEOs or similar. I mean, to do the right thing. And I think that's the most important thing that you mentioned. At the end of the day, you have to do what's right for the patient. And I know that many of us like to be part of the organization, and we like to be very proud of belonging to something. But at the end of the day, patient come first, and that's what I put in front of everything, which is not like many of my colleagues that put profits before patients. They know that the moment they don't follow what they are told to do at an institution, bye profits.
Right. Yeah. And so, we have this kind of institutional groupthink conundrum. We want the institution to do well because we're part of that group or family. So how does one balance that, Chris, in terms of doing what's right? It's obviously not simple, but how do you balance that?
It like you say, it is very difficult because you're trying to balance finance, service, quality, strategy, all these different things. But at the end of the day, if you're doing what's right for the patient, and in concert, you're also making sure your revenue cycle is is taken care of, right? We got to make sure we're paid. We can't just ignore the fundamentals. So first of all, it goes back to you have to excel at the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
So that you say, well, what's the balance? Well, first, excel at the fundamentals. You can get fancy later, but if you can first do that, and then the focus should always be back to the patient, because
Amen.
Ultimately, I'm thinking of an actual example. So my grandmother ended up getting COVID, and I can't remember, it was 2020 or 2021, and our family had to say goodbye to my grandma on Zoom. And I got to tell you, it to this day bothers me a great deal. I had zero closure when my grandma died. I had absolutely no closure, because to watch somebody and say goodbye on Zoom, that's not the same. And the hospitals were saying, no, you can't have anybody. You couldn't even have a funeral in Minnesota.
Wow.
You couldn't, and these hospitals, for how supposedly tolerant they are and how open-minded they are, all of a sudden became the most closed-minded organizations that you can imagine. She was given remdesivir, given, COVID shot and so forth. And, it just, you look at all this, and instead of being worried about the patient, all they worried about were policies.
Right.
So you talk about profits over patients. A lot of organizations, it's policies over patients, right? Because the issue is, well, we're following the policy. well, you're following the policy because your lawyer told you to do X, Y, Z because they're trying to, keep you in the guardrails. But at the end of the day, are you really doing the right thing by making sure that the patient could even be with the family? No. And so I would argue that it's more complex in healthcare than most industries.
Yeah.
And it gets, as you know, extremely complicated when you're dealing as a physician, plus you have administration saying we got to do X, Y, and Z, and the lawyers are saying, it puts you in the middle of everything. But at the end of the day, we are there to do no harm, to
Mhm.
treat the patient, but also have compassion. And we need to treat the patient, but the family too. It's not just the patient itself, it's the whole family. It's the spouse, it's grandma and grandpa, and the grandkids. And it breaks my heart to this day that my grandma died alone. And so, it just
Yeah, I'm
that
sorry for
that
your loss,
really,
Chris, and
it
that
was
experience. I know that
right.
resonates with so many people that have gone through similar things. And so much of business or institutions do what's expedient, but are they doing what's empathetic and right? And that, oh man, I'm truly sorry for that. And so many have unfortunately a similar story. And that's why restoring ethics to medicine is such an important aspect of what we're all trying to do together. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. We have a younger generation coming up following what we're doing and listening, and many medical students, and they're kind of stuck in this growing beast of a system, as it were. But how do you develop courage before you need it?
It is very difficult nowadays. I mean, I keep on telling myself that they don't make students the way they used to, but also, in the past we didn't have these monster institutions, at least with all this bureaucracy that we're having to deal with all these protocols for absolutely everything. I mean, you and me went to school in a much different time, and I see it very difficult. I mean, unless they have mentors, which I truly believe that they make a big difference, unless you have a mentor that guides you through the process and keeps on reminding you that you have to do what's right for the patient, not what's right for the organization, then I see it, at least from a medical education standpoint, it's very difficult.
And how do you
Chris?
deal with that, Chris? I mean, you've seen that in the hospital setting, administration, doctors trying to get everybody to work together. How do you deal with that conflict between um, competing ideas?
It's very complicated. It's very difficult. I think the big thing is you have to have a common goal, right?
Yeah.
So if our common goal is to take care of the patient, and there are some organizations that say, look, if we just focus on the patient, everything takes care of itself. You've heard that before.
Yeah.
Theoretically, that's true. However, in practice, it also means you have to be doing all these other things at the same time. Regulatory, you got to make sure that all your equipment is taken care of, the building is being properly taken care of, and you can't do surgery if you have a leaky roof. I mean, so it all kind of has to go together, right? And so the key is to put the patient first, but also you have to be excellent at those fundamentals and excellent at the kinds of people that you hire. I mean, for instance, there's a bank called Happy State Bank, and there's a really good book called Non-Negotiable. I highly recommend that everybody on this podcast reads it. And it's all about how does Happy State Bank look at their employees. They hire the smile, and every day you must come in happy, except one day you can call in. It's called Crabby Day. You can call in and say, hey guys, I'm crabby today. Okay, you're crabby today. The rest of the year, you better be happy. So they hire happy people, right, with good attitudes. I can train anybody to do anything, but I can't get the attitude unless they have it, right? I can't train the smile. Same thing with United Supermarkets out in Lubbock, Texas. you go there versus if you go to a lot of these other grocery stores, it's some kid who doesn't even want to be there versus you go to United, it's, well, hey, Chris, so where are you from? Tell me about your day. They walk you out to to your car. They ask you questions. I mean, completely different. So a lot of it is scripting, but you want it to be authentic as well. And it's training, but it's all about the kinds of people you hire, right? I want to hire trustworthy people who are going to be like Daniel. Now that's hard to find, a lot of those people, but that's what I'm looking for, right? And I want the good attitude with the good values. I need the smile. I want them to speak up to me and tell me, Chris, I know that you think this is a good thing. I really don't think that's a great idea. Well, hey, tell me, right? I mean, you need to be that kind of leader and you need to be that kind of staff member. So those are the kinds of things that we need in healthcare today, I believe.
Yeah, and just having that ability to converse and right or wrong, being allowed to at the very least ask the question.
Yeah.
And one of those principles is drawing the line, and we've seen so much of that. Know where to draw the line. That's such an important principle. Joe, have you had moments where you've just had to draw the line, walk away from the table?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I felt that I was doing something that was not ethically justified, or when I felt that I was doing something because the hospital administration wanted it for, call it, maybe they needed something for their own numbers or stuff like that, but it had nothing to do with true patient care, and it was going to actually compromise my patient care. I walked out. I mean, and it was very simple. First, I always tried to do what Chris is mentioning. I would go and I talk to the, whoever was the CEO or the chief medical officer and say, hey, we have this issue. And I would try to get them to at least to talk. Unfortunately, many of the big institutions in large academic places, like, for example, here in Houston, I mean, you don't get to talk to them. There are so many layers before you get to talk to somebody. And they all care about all these protocols. And I understand, they have to maintain themselves profitable so they continue to have a hospital and all these other things. But when they are asking you to do things, I'm going to give you an example. For example, I've written a lot about a concept on acute hypertension, which is called hypertensive crisis. There is a term that is called malignant hypertension. That is a term that was coined by the Germans in the 1920s. At that time, if somebody told you have malignant hypertension had a mortality rate of 99% or something like that. Now, in 1984, the Joint National Committee for the Diagnosis and Treatment of Hypertension erased that, says don't use the term malignant hypertension. However, Medicare pays the hospitals more money if you code a patient as having malignant hypertension than if you say the patient has hypertensive crisis. And on many instances, I can remember, I would admit a patient to a hospital and I would say, acute hypertensive crisis. I would get a little memo from one of their coders that says, do you mean malignant hypertension? And I would say, no, I don't mean malignant hypertension. I mean this. And, it's something that I knew about. I had written extensively about it. And it was wrong to call it like that. I can see where the hospital is coming from, because obviously they want more revenue, but at the same time, it's wrong. So yes, I would walk away on those instances. And at the end of the day, I would not recodify they would want me to write my note again and use a different diagnosis just for billing purposes. No.
Yeah, I remember working in the emergency rooms in rural Minnesota back in the day, and the coders would come to me, well, you should upcode this and do this, that, and the other. And I said, but this is the simple thing I did. No, this is a simple visit. This isn't a complex visit. And so you just say, look, no, I'm going to do what's right, not. And so from an executive chair, how do you approach that, Chris, when these compromise situation comes up, someone refuses to compromise? What's the conversation like there? From an executive point of view, trying to come to that compromise position where refusal is on the table?
I think a lot of it goes back to what a lot of people don't want to talk about is situational ethics, right? So if you say, well, everything in moderation, you okay with murder in moderation? No. You okay with the little little bit of fentanyl, anesthesia, yeah, but I mean, so I think part of it goes back to you have to look at what is the situation, and we're going to go back to the concept of do no harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I'm going to go back to the Hippocratic Oath. I'm also going to go back to the scientific method. I expect the physicians are going to use the scientific method in their practices, right? To weigh the evidence, to say, you know what, yeah, the reality is actually the outcome is not much better for this. We've investigated, so or no, there's a huge discrepancy. Can you show me the data? Yeah, I can. Here it is. Check it out. Okay, well then, for this decision, clearly you've done your research. So yeah, we need to spend more money on this because we would have an adverse outcome by doing X, Y, or Z. Then, so a lot of it, when we talk about compromise, it depends on what it is, right? If we're compromising on little stuff versus big stuff, we're not going to compromise deal breakers. We're not going to compromise really big things. We don't do a little murder. We don't do well, hey,
Right.
just give them half a thing of remdesivir. No, don't give them remdesivir.
Right.
In the first place.
And how do you define that in terms of like the non-negotiables? Especially it's important early in the career, and we've got these younger physicians coming up. What should they look for in institutional culture, or defining those non-negotiables early on? How would you encourage them, or guide them, or teach them in that regard?
Well, first of all, most of life is not an emergency, and unless you're a trauma surgeon, you're most likely probably not dealing in emergencies every single minute of your life. So therefore, take the time to go shadow people. Take the time to do things when you have plenty of time on your hands to go shadow people and meet with people and just get to know them and ask really good questions. So part of it goes back to, you need to start with, what are the questions that I need to be asking to identify what is the culture really like? Not the perception of, oh, I've heard it's really great at the Mayo Clinic, right? So, well, what is the Mayo Clinic really like to work for? What is the Cleveland Clinic really like to work for? MD Anderson, Baylor, whatever, right? And what you find is when you start digging in to a lot of the hospital systems that you hear about that have great and wonderful reputations, it's not always the same as what is reported, shall we say. And so take the time to find out the difference between reality and perception. That's number one. Number two, take the time to talk to people who are the harshest critics, because they a lot of times will give you insights into things. I don't want to talk to people that they think everything's rosy. I want to talk to somebody and say, hey, tell me about, why shouldn't I go work here? Well, you shouldn't because of these three things. Really? Wow. Okay. Well, tell me more, right? And get a sense for this stuff way before you ever need to make a decision. Be very proactive. And so by being proactive, that's where a lot of this stuff comes into play.
Absolutely. And I like that you bring up you brought up the word mentor. We have such a great opportunity in our generation now to be the mentors, but I think it also behooves that medical student to find the good mentor, the one that will allow the questions to be asked and allows that exchange of curiosity. And I think curiosity in and of itself is moral courage. And allowing that curiosity on the mentor's part is the courage to think openly and clearly and to be taught as well, and humility. You brought up another great slide that I really liked, Chris. Some things are not for sale. And so you've been on that hospital operation side up close. So how real in this day and age is the pressure to potentially compromise ethics for institutional survival?
All the time. There is a ton of pressure right now. And part of it is, a lot of people think hospitals make a ton of money, and some do. But there are a lot of hospitals that barely eke by with a 1% margin. Some of them barely, they'll have, like, I deal with clients all the time that have, 5, 10, 15 days of cash on hand, small critical access hospitals. it's tough. Like when I ran critical access hospitals, I had a hospital I was working on. It was a turnaround in Oklahoma, and I got a call from the controller. She says, "Chris, we have $1,900 in the bank today. Which bills would you like to pay?" I said, "None. We have $1,900 in the bank today." And so, these kinds of big decisions that you have to make are critical, right? And so it goes back to you have to, at the end of the day, you have to look at this whole idea of profits over people, people over profits, etc. The reality is you have to make money. You really do. Because at the end of the day, when you don't have money, what do you think about money, right? But at the same time, you cannot compromise your deal breakers and your values. You can still make money, but it may mean that you need to trim some fat, or it may mean that you need to do things differently, or get an outsider to come in and say, "Whoa, do you know you have those blind spots?" Whatever it is.
Yeah, and I remember starting my lab decades ago and taking out huge loans for equipment and staff and all of that. But our principle was do the right thing the right way for the right reason, and then don't worry about the rest because it'll follow if you're doing it in that way. And Joe, in your opinion, compromise and what we experience in everyday life, not just medicine, but when does compromise cross the line into corruption?
Any time you are getting any profit for doing something that is unethical, doesn't matter what it is. I mean, whether you are modifying the medical record to reflect a diagnosis that doesn't exist, which we see, whether you're giving a medication because you are getting a rep that's going to give you something in exchange. I mean, I think that's when you cross the line. And again, we need to remember most of us who went to medical school did so because we have a passion for what we do. We didn't do it for the money. We didn't do it. We did it because we really wanted to help people. I mean, some of us, even now, in the middle of war, we're actually looking at, hey, how can we enlist ourselves to go and help? Because that's what we do, not for money. We want to help people, independently on which side you are.
Yeah. And, this kind of brings up a tough question, but what I'm going to throw out the positive or the negative and then the positive. So what destroys trust in healthcare institutions the fastest, and how do we rebuild it? Or what rebuilds it? Chris, we'll start with you on that one.
Mm-hmm. I would tell you that my trust has been shattered after what happened with my grandma, and
sure,
seeing, between Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins and just all the things that we've seen, there's a lot of evidence now that we cannot trust a lot of organizations, whether it was the CDC, FDA, you name it, telling us that ivermectin was horse-paste, just quit it, y'all, or whatever they said. It's so when you do that, you break down trust when we have all this evidence that ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, doxycycline, fluvoxamine, etc., have been working wonders. Look at the study in Uttar Pradesh, right, back in the day. So we knew all this stuff was working, but then we were told, no, be quiet, don't, come on, right? So in the book, Cowboy Ethics, one of the things was, when you make a promise, keep it. So they were not keeping promises.
Right.
Where'd you come up with 6 feet away, 6 feet apart, right? What about the masks, et cetera? And every time we would see that, we realize it's baloney. So therefore, my trust goes to zero, like that. And so all of a sudden, the patients have been awakened, which is why I not only love to donate to the IMA and other organizations like yours, but it is critical that I can trust that a physician is being honest with me, that they're not on the take, that when I read a journal, it's not brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Moderna. I don't need that. I need to know brought to you by individual donors who they don't have a dog in the fight. They just want to find out what is honestly, what's the takeaway.
So do we even rebuild it, or do we build anew?
Boy.
It's a tough question. I know. It's the conundrum we find ourselves in, right, Joe?
I mean, I'll tell you, you've heard that thing that they tell you, once a cheater, always a cheater. I mean, how can you rebuild trust when you have been misled once or twice? It is a serious problem. And the way I look at it is, that's why you have to create these alternative or parallel systems. That's why, for example, at the Independent Medical Alliance, we launched our own journal of independent medicine, because we didn't want to be kept hostage by any of these big pharma or anybody else that was interested in, we're going to give you money so you can publish our data. That's not right.
Yeah, and can we even have ethical leadership without accountability is another question that comes to mind. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, if accountability is keep your promise, right, and you're not keeping your promise, then the only thing you can do is either you do your own thing, or you hold those people accountable to whatever consequences you can, that's within the law. And and it could be that we need to reinstitute shame in a way that is kind of old school, and say, look, you guys really messed us up during COVID, and you should be ashamed of, will you really public apologize for all the damage you did and the trust that you broke over those years, right?
Yeah, basically a truth and reconciliation type scenario.
Yeah. But I don't think that even within all the apologies in the world that they will give you after so many people that we saw dying and all the catastrophe that we had during COVID, I would not take even the best apology.
Good point.
Yeah,
an apology doesn't bring somebody back from the death. Yes.
True. And that brings up something that we are involved in here at the Independent Medical Alliance, and that's helping to introduce the COVID Justice Resolution, because this accountability does matter, and it's not about revenge, it's about restoring this trust. It's about transparency, ethical review, learning from these failures. And we have a video discussion between Jeffrey Tucker and me that we'll continue refining. It clearly outlines why justice and ethics go hand in hand, and IMA has shared this. And Chris and Joe, how important is this accountability if we want future Daniels to step forward into what truly is a noble profession?
You have to be accountable from day one that you enter into a profession from a medical standpoint. I mean, no question about it. Accountability, day one. And that's why I'm still kind of a hard teacher on my students, because I want them to be good students. I want them to be good doctors. I want them to be accountable for each one of their actions. I mean, not just blow it off. It's no big deal. And I assume that, from an administrative standpoint, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you also need to start way low and then just walk your way up.
It goes back to, I want to deal with trustworthy people who do the right thing. And if I can trust them and they've developed that culture of trust, and when you tell me, physician A, that you're going to show up on Monday morning, and you show up every time Monday morning, now you're building all these building blocks to develop that trust, right? So trust is, it is earned, and it is built upon a long period of time of evidence. And without that, if you say, oh, well, just trust me. I had an individual many moons ago, 23, 24 years ago, and the chief quality officer at the time said, okay, guys, we just need to know that I need everybody to trust me. None of us even knew this person. That is an immediate red flag that you cannot be trusted, right? If you come in the organization as a brand new person saying, I expect you to trust me. So at the end of the day, everything is about trust. It's absolutely critical. And if that means you have to do something in a parallel system, so be it.
Yeah. That, hey, trust me, bro, is that not how to start a conversation. Well, this has been, I think, very insightful. I think people don't realize we do have these conversations behind the scenes very often, because the situational ethics, administrations, hospitals, doctors. Life has to work. People want to be well. Things have to work well together. What would healthcare look like tomorrow if 10,000 Daniels did step forward?
Okay, can you help me find the other 9,500 that I'm missing, and then we can get.
We found some of them, thank heavens.
Because we already found pretty much several that are actually quite.
Yeah, I mean, what if you were the head of an institution, Chris, and you had 10,000 Daniels working with you?
It would be fantastic. To be able to trust everybody that you work with and know they're all going to do the right thing. You could do anything. You could develop a fantastic health system.
Absolutely.
If you knew every read that you did from radiology was not, nothing was up-coded, down-coded. Every physician that you came in the ER, if it said level 5, it was level 5. It said level 3, it was level 3, not level 1, or vice versa. If we all knew, and if we knew administration was not on the take, or they weren't up to, bad things, and we knew that everything was trustworthy, insurance companies were doing the right thing. Can you imagine if an insurance company said, you know what, we're gonna be just like Daniel?
Well, and I think we're all here tonight because we together believe that we can find 10,000 Daniels and we can do this. And there's optimism on the horizon if we all band together with this cowboy ethic. And I love that you brought that forward, Chris. I think it's such a good foundational structure on which to have conversation. And I do think, we are about drawing those lines. And that's why I think we've all found this fantastic group together. And I think the future of medicine can be optimism, and the future of health can be optimism. And I think we're engaging with the right people to make that happen. So tonight we have talked about courage, and we are drawing the line. Principles only matter, if they're written down, declared publicly, lived consistently. And we at IMA have formalized that commitment in our member ethics and values declaration. So here at the Independent Medical Alliance, here's our member ethics and our values declaration. These are our ethical shared commitments. And it's the core of who we are and what we do. And to Chris's point, these are the principles to be a Daniel, to stand on these principles. And I would encourage people to go through those one by one. If you're new to IMA or listening to us, understand, what we do. And, leadership's easy when times are calm, right? I'm sure you've experienced that in your career, Chris. When it's calm, things are easy. But when the lines are circling, it's the principles that matter the most. And healthcare won't regain trust just through policy alone. It's through people willing to stand firm, like you did, like Joe has, like many have. And, thank both of you for reminding us that courage is lived and not declared. You guys have been excellent examples of that. And thank you for joining tonight. Any just closing thoughts, Chris? And then I'll turn it over to some exciting news from Joe's recent travels.
Well, I have to say it's definitely a privilege to not only be here tonight with both of you and this whole group, but also I'm a big believer in what you do, and I've been studying since 2020, and I'm thankful for a drug rep who came to my father-in-law and said, "Hey, you need to check out ivermectin. You need to check these things out. Don't listen to the traditional stuff. Just kind of check it out for yourself." And he brought that back to all kinds of people within my family and extended family, and we've been saved so many things. Dr. Peter McCullough, Pierre Corey, Paul Merrick, Dr. Zelenko, just all
So
of the greats over the years that have stood firm. Pierre Corey and Paul Merrick took a big hit, big time,
Sure.
and Peter McCullough, et cetera, have all really taken big hits for standing up and doing what's right. So I feel like we have examples of our own Daniels in our own day.
Yeah.
And we need to be like them.
I noticed Autumn's popped on the screen before we jump to Joe's slides. Do we have time for a question or two, Autumn?
Yes, we'll just go through a couple. We won't have time to go through all of them, but I'll just try to speed through a couple.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, David asked, I understand there are no classes in ethics/morals in most med schools. Is that true?
No, that actually is not true. You have most schools have a bioethics class. I mean, it does happen. Now, back in the day when I went to school, medical ethics was associated to history of medicine. So they gave you both of them together, which was fascinating because you really learned a lot. Nowadays, unfortunately, they limit the number of hours, but ethics is extremely important. Actually, it's one of the most, about 10% of the professional examinations that they do for medical students, 10% of the questions have to do with ethics.
Another anonymous attendee asked if you guys know any statistics on how many doctors retired because of these ethics problems, and even if not statistics, just from your experience.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of colleagues just hang up the saddle, no longer writing for any brand, and they're done because they've seen it. I don't know how much you saw that in your hospital systems, Chris.
I've heard of some that have, but I don't know to what extent. I'm not sure.
I actually have had many people that come to me and says, how come you have not dropped medicine altogether after all of this has been going on? Mm-hmm. It's like, some of us just enjoy punishment.
And then last quick question, since I won't be able to go through all of the questions we were asked. Julie just asked, what is the author of the non-negotiable book that you mentioned, Chris?
I believe I want to say maybe last name Silverstein, something like that.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah.
Something like that.
That'll be enough to look up on the internet.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Chris. And again, thanks for your patience behind the scenes with the team. I know we've gone a little long tonight. And Joe, always a pleasure to have these conversations with you. And I'm going to, Joe's had a really cool experience recently. So I'm just going to step back and let Joe take it over. And Chris, thanks again. And let's hear about Joe's adventures real quick.
So, well, it's amazing. I've been lucky enough in my life to be able to meet a few Nobel Prize winners and actually have been to the Nobel Prize ceremony once in my life. But I had a unique experience recently. My spouse and I, we decided to take a quick trip to Japan. And while we were there, we got the opportunity to meet Professor Omura. This is the gentleman that discovered ivermectin. So can you imagine? I mean, he was like my idol. Like I was in Disney when I met him. I mean, it's like that kind of stuff. We gave him an award on behalf of the Independent Medical Alliance. But Professor Omura is fascinating. He's super humble individual. It's a guy that every royalty that was made out of his discovery of ivermectin was donated for medical schools, for hospitals. Unbelievable, humble gentleman who is over the age of 90 and continues to work every single day. He has an amazing, he has his own little museum in Tokyo. I was able to get connected to him through one of our fellows, Professor Morimasa, and another one of our friends, Professor Fukuda. And for example, this what you guys are seeing there, that is how they get the bacteria to make ivermectin. And they have God knows how many bacteria they're just cooking. They cook it for 300 hours at a very high temperature. And that only makes 2 grams, tiny little 2 grams per liter of fluid. Dr. Omura has a little collection of 25,000 different types of fungi or fungus, of mushrooms, for to call it other way. It is absolutely fascinating. One of the best experiences I've had in years. We also met with the Independent Medical Alliance people in Japan. In this picture, you can see Morimasa, who is one of our fellows. You can also see Professor Fukuda and several others that are actively involved in caring for patients with COVID, post-COVID, and other conditions. So it's very nice that we get all the way to Japan.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, we are out of time tonight. Autumn, I'm going to turn it over to you for closing announcements. And we look forward to having more conversations. Chris, this has been great. And Joe, thanks for sharing that amazing life experience. I think many people would have loved to have been there with you. That is just so cool. So without further ado, let's go on to some closing announcements. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We really enjoy this, and it's just such a great opportunity to learn from great people like Chris and so many other colleagues and so many other courageous Daniels that are out there. So over to you, Autumn.
Sounds good. I will take it from here. One of the first things that we wanted to go over tonight was just our new heart health guide. Your labs might look normal, but that doesn't mean that your heart is truly protected. Building on last week's show on heart health, our free practical guide for a healthy heart gives you a clear whole body roadmap to cardiovascular prevention, plus key markers standard blood work often misses. You can download this guide by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or by searching geni.us/healthy heart guide. It's on the homepage of our website right now. This guide was created by IMA Senior Fellow, the wonderful Dr. Christina Carmen. So if you have the chance, definitely download that guide and give it a look. A lot of really great information. This year, as we have mentioned week after week, April 17th through the 18th, we are hosting a medical education conference, Emerging Trends in Medicine. This is a 2-day gathering dedicated to the latest innovations, research, and forward-thinking practices, really just shaping the future of the healthcare system. The entire conference agenda has been approved for continuing medical education credits. So those attending can earn 12.75 CME credits. And the schedule includes 2 sessions on ethics, which is typically a state requirement each year. This event will offer dynamic programs of expert-led lectures and plenty of networking opportunities. You can get your tickets today at imahealth.org/conference. Next week, we're going inside the research, therapeutic candidates for measles. Join Dr. Joseph Varon, Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Elizabeth Mumper, Senior Fellow in Pediatrics, and Matt Halma, IMA's Director of Scientific Research. This show is on Wednesday, March 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern as they break down emerging treatment options and really just what the latest data shows. Well, thank you again to Dr. Cole, Dr. Varon, and Chris for joining us tonight. And thanks to all of you, whether you're watching live or catching the replay. Before we close, we wanted to share a short clip of Dr. Ryan Cole interviewing Jeffrey Tucker from the Brownstone Institute as they discuss what the COVID Justice Resolution is, why it matters, and how IMA is we're proud supporters of this effort and as founding members. Please review this resolution, and we encourage you to sign it, support, and share it. If we can ask one more thing of you, please call your state legislators and let them know you support accountability, transparency, and encourage them to support the COVID Justice Resolution. Your voice really does make a difference. Thank you all so much. Let's take a look.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ryan Cole, Senior Fellow with the Independent Medical Alliance, and I'm honored to be joined in conversation today with Jeffrey Tucker, the founder of the Brownstone Institute at brownstone.org, who has been a leading voice through the pandemic and has really stood up for freedom, the voice of the people, and has brought together an amazing group of thinkers from around the country. Today, we're going to talk about the COVID Justice Resolution, and it can be found at covidjustice.org. This is a critically important document in my mind. I'm proud as an IMA member to be part of this. The IMA is a founding member on this resolution, and we're fully supportive of this effort. It's an initiative about ensuring that there's real justice for the atrocities that have been committed during COVID. We feel that accountability really matters, not for revenge, but for truth, for restoration, and prevention of future harms. And Jeffrey, why now? What's the impetus behind this resolution? Brownstone, IMA, and many other wonderful organizations are a part of this. Why now, in your opinion?
Well, let me say, first of all, that I'm thrilled that IMA has joined. I love the Independent Medical Alliance and what you're doing. We got great news that Elon Musk is publicly backing this.
Fantastic.
And I'll tell you that it really matters to me because when the lockdowns first happened, this was in March 2020, Elon Musk was the only major corporate leader in America of a large scale business, the only one to publicly denounce it. He said that he would sleep on his factory floor, but he would never close it, and that the public health police could come in and arrest him if they wanted to. So he refused to close his production and did in fact sleep on the factory floor, and there was one moment there where it was very possible he could have been arrested, but he absolutely refused. When Musk said, we have to save free speech, I'm going to buy Twitter and turn it into X, he did in fact save free speech. So he deserves a lot of credit. So I'm very proud that he's backing this resolution. So you asked the question, why now? Well, because nothing else is happening. This is the 6-year mark. It was this date 6 years ago that the NIH was flying back on a chartered flight from Wuhan, having been given a junket tour of how great the CCP was in controlling the virus by locking everybody in their homes. And the report from the World Health Organization, which the U.S. signed and an American wrote, said the entire world should lock down just like China. And that document is what inspired 194 nations of the world to lock down entirely, to wait for the delivery of a consumer product that was supposed to be injected into everybody. When people started resisting, they forced it on us. So that's just the beginning of the story. I could talk an hour about everything that happened. It was a horror show. I don't think we can let this pass in silence. We have to have some kind of healing, some kind of resolution, some kind of reckoning. And it was my thought that the best way to do this and the most prominent way to do this would be to get the Senate to do it. I know how Washington works. They only put out fires. Let's create a fire. Right? So I wrote the resolution to cover as many issues as we could. It just covers a fraction of the issues, but it's things on which I think everybody would agree that this is not the way you treat your citizens. They're not lab rats. The Constitution still applies in a pandemic. You can't just delete the Bill of Rights, out of nowhere. You can't close the churches and violate people's religious liberties. So the momentum is on our side. After 2 days, we had 20,000 signatures, which is, if you've ever run an online petition, that is a huge marker of success. And then, of course, many, many groups jumped in and said, look, I want to be part of this. This is great. Go to covidjustice.org, sign it. It's something you can do. We can't make the world a perfect place. We can't bring perfect justice for what's happened to us and our families in this dark period. But this is something you can do to add your voice to making things a little bit more right than they otherwise would be.
Jeffrey, thank you for doing this, and thank you for joining me today to get this message out. And let's make it at least 1 million people. Why not 10 million? Why not 100 million? Let's make this America again.
I'm with you on that.
Thank you.